Welcome to What's Brewing with IAT Insurance Group, where episode after episode we cover the latest marketplace trends with subject matter experts who are fueling our mission to provide insurance answers together. Grab your cup and let's settle in.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to What's Brewing. I'm Victoria King, Marketing and Communications Manager at IAT Insurance Group. Today, I'm joined by Tony, partner at Redfin Group. Redfin Group is a digital agency based in Jacksonville, Florida, and is one of our partners for website development and SEO. Tony works with organizations across a variety of industries to help strengthen their digital presence and improve search visibility. Tony, before we dive in, can you share a little bit about your background and how you got into marketing?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm primarily, educationally, and most of my work history has been in technology, but I've always had a real deep interest in marketing. And with the advent of the web, of course, this is going back when we started the firm 15 years ago. With the advent of the web, it seemed like, and has turned out that way, that the internet really was the intersection between marketing and technology. So I got to combine my knowledge of tech with my interest in marketing to launch a tech-focused marketing firm like Redfin Group.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's one thing that keeps marketing really exciting too, is just how technology is so interconnected with marketing. And it's been really interesting just to see how that intersects. But I know we'll talk a little bit more about that intersection today. But before we jump into the topic, I'd also love to know, how do you take your coffee, hot, iced, out in a shop? What are we looking at there?
So I'm working remote from Oklahoma randomly to attend a cycling event out here. And there is a coffee shop here called Pony Coffee. It used to be an old bike shop. It was run by kind of an eccentric dude that also became a famous photographer. So I've been kind of in love with this coffee shop and going there every morning before I come here to the co-work for work. And I've been getting an Americano with an extra shot with a little bit of honey and brown sugar in it. And it's been amazing every morning.
That sounds delicious. So it sounds like you're more into hot coffee, or does it depend on the season for you?
I don't discriminate. It's been chilly here, so I've been into hot coffee. But if it was the summer, I'd probably get an ice brew or something.
Nice. Yeah, I'm with you. Any coffee or caffeine in my book is a win.
For sure.
So I know that you and I both spend a lot of time thinking about digital visibility. Since you work with multiple different types of businesses across multiple industries, what are really some of the shifts that you've been seeing in how people search online and discover businesses today?
So the shift with AI, there's a couple of different big shifts. One is that the AI summaries are being included into the Google results now. I'm sure we've all noticed that. If you ask Google a question, say 2 years ago or even a year ago, you would get search results, some ads, some search results, and links you would click on, and you would potentially click to a website, and that website would have the content. That's changing in that Google is now scraping those websites, just like it always has, but then creating a Google AI-derived summary of the answer that you're looking for. And what that's doing is it's creating something called a zero-click search, where typically back in the day, and by back in the day, I mean a year ago, you would search and click. Now you search, you get the answer within the Google results via the AI summary, and you don't click at all. That's been a huge challenge for people that use a content marketing strategy where you create great content, you publish that content, and then that content creates website traffic for you. Now what that does is feeds the Google AI engine in the summary, and they'll mention you in the summary, but you won't necessarily get a click. So that's been a huge monumental shift for a lot of our clients. I'd say even in just the last 6 months. And then of course, other competing AI platforms like ChatGPT have just basically have replaced Google search with now an interactive conversation with a generative AI bot.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think I saw a stat recently that around 60% of Google search results are now populating with AI summaries. And to your point regarding the click-through rates, are you seeing with your different businesses that you work with, are you seeing lower click-through rates kind of across the board, since now users are digesting that information differently and just looking at the summaries versus clicking through to those businesses' websites?
Yeah, so there's a complicated answer to that question, and it basically it depends. So if you're looking at like a purely informational search, I need to do something, or I'm trying to learn how to do something, that's typically been a content play where you would figure out what your customers were asking, and then formulate and write the best answer possible, put that in your website, and then you would get search traffic. Pretty straightforward. Those informational queries are being completely disrupted by AI, so much so that you might even be seeing like a 50% drop off of search traffic from last year to this year, even though your search rankings have gone up. The searches that aren't being disrupted at all are the products and services searches. So if you're looking for a product or a service, and you have the intent to buy that product or service, those are not being disrupted by AI at all, because AI can't really deliver a product or a service yet. It only delivers information. So it's a tale of two worlds, really, depending on what your inbound traffic looks like. If it's informational, it's been completely shifted to zero-click searches in AI, or at least half as. And if it's a product or service related, it's not had any impact at all.
Being in insurance, let's zoom in on some of that informational content specifically a little bit. What advice would you give, given how, searches have changed, and thinking about content? What advice do you have to help counteract kind of that informational search now?
It's two-tier, really, if you think about it. So for insurance products and services, you're an insurance broker. You have really good presence in Google search for your services and the insurance products you sell. You're not going to see too much disruption. However, if you have a content-based strategy where you're providing information, like information about certain insurance products, and you hope that people that are interested or asking those questions are also customers, and they'll turn into a qualified lead, that is being relatively disrupted. It isn't necessarily a bad thing. So like, think about it this way. And for a better word, like a lot of our clients early on have been freaking out, because like if you lose 30 to 50% of your inbound traffic, that's a kind of a catastrophe. However, what that's being replaced with in the zero-click search, in the AI summaries, and the long-form AI conversations, is it's being replaced by brand references and links within those AI summaries and conversations. So in terms of like a content strategy, you're using a similar strategy, but the goal is no longer to get people on your site. The goal is to become mentioned within that AI response. And then potentially those people can either search you individually, or a lot of times, and increasingly, links are being provided within the AI summaries and people will click over. But I think the real big issue with that is when you get people on site, and we're so used to this in marketing now. You get people on site, you see that in Google Analytics. You can see like, I got this many visitors turned into X number of leads. Everything's really quantifiable. When you're mentioned in an AI summary or a conversation, you have no real record of that. So you can't quantify that and you can't measure it, which definitely leads to a ton of anxiety, maybe a little bit of anxiety, because we're losing control, and it's taking us back to like marketing of yesteryear, when like you would run primarily like TV ads or magazine or radio ads, and you really didn't have any idea how many people interacted with or how much business was generated. We're kind of returning to that in a sense. So and the reason we're returning to that is that the AI engines, primarily Google and ChatGPT, Google Gemini and ChatGPT, are keeping all that information close to the vest for competitive reasons, and they're not disclosing it. So we're having to do a lot more I'd say like old school, like marketing 101, where we're trying to understand the customer behaviors and get to know them a little bit better so that we can market to them via these engines, knowing that we won't necessarily be able to measure the direct results like we used to with traditional search.
Yeah, I think that's a great point in itself, though, because technology is evolving and will always evolve and change over time. But really, when we're thinking about marketing and the principles, that doesn't change. So sometimes even going back to basics and some of those 101 principles can be a little bit refreshing, especially in this day and age. Like, I think just about content in general and how important that still is. But even, something as simple as writing a blog post can help you rank in those AI summaries too. So, well, what are your thoughts about just SEO in general and kind of how that's evolved with AI and how some of those 101 principles still apply?
I probably have two answers to that. One about 101 principles and the other about SEO. I can say the encouraging fact is that SEO really hasn't changed much. SEO and GEO, generative engine optimization and search engine optimization, they aren't very different. And they aren't very different because AI has been infused in search engine results for over a decade. This new conversational interface the novel conversational interface that we've become accustomed to over the last 12 months or so with ChatGPT and Google Gemini, that's a human interface layer that's been layered on top of the existing technology stack that's always been there. So the rules are for SEO and GEO to get in the AI summaries and AI conversations are identical. There's no change whatsoever, which is why almost all of our clients that have really good Google and search ranking results are also ranking very well and doing really well in AI summaries. They both GEO and SEO work from the it's called an acronym. It's called EEAT: experience, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. And it's just 4 characteristics that Google searches and generative AI engines key on to figure out if your content is worthwhile and if you're going to be ranked well.
I'm familiar with the EAT acronym. That's one of those 101 principles that I think still applies in the world of SEO and GEO today.
So I think the advantage, so this has been disruptive clearly, but I think one of the advantages of this is kind of returning back to this marketing 101, where we're actually getting to kind of the mathematics of marketing. If you think about it, we think about keywords, keyword search volume, keyword ranking and positioning. And it's all about the math and logic of how we get these SEO rankings. But with AI and not being able to quantify what our impact is in AI directly, we're having to get to know the customer a lot better and get back to the principles of who are our customers, what are their concerns, what are they asking, what are the conversations that these customers are going to be getting into with generative AI that will bring them to us as a brand. And that exercise, I think, has gotten us closer to our customers and given us more insight into their behavior. So ultimately, the loss of our ability to measure, the direct impact of our marketing has actually gotten us closer to our customers in a sense that's going to help us as an organization and help us with our marketing.
Yeah, I think that's a silver lining in all of this is it's making us have some of those conversations and better understand our audience, which again goes back to marketing 101. What strategies do you typically recommend to the businesses that you work with on getting to know their audience better? Is it sending out surveys to those groups? Is it focus groups? What kind of strategies do you typically recommend for that?
Probably the most effective thing is finding those key people in the organization that touch the customers and really understand the customer journey and the customer's needs. And then just enter into like a long form conversation with them to understand, what are the frequently asked questions? What are their concerns? What are the points that we're selling against, in a competitive marketplace? And those people, I think, give us likely the most valuable information we can. And then from that, we kind of go down that route where we define the customer personas. And then it's a little bit more of a creative exercise, whereas before it was kind of math and logic. Here are the search keywords, here are the volumes. It's more like, if I were this customer, what would be my first question? What would I ask? And then kind of get into their mindset. What would be the first question that I would ask in AI? And then ask that question in AI. And then what would be the follow-up question? And then understand the brands that are surfaced by the AI engines in the conversation, and then figure out and kind of go back and take those brands apart and figure out how they got there and what they're doing to get there. So it's a lot more creative than it is math and science like it was a year ago, but it's also allowing us to get a little bit more in touch with the humans that we're actually interacting with, our actual customers. And I think it's actually helping getting a better understanding of the customers and the marketplace.
That's a great point. When you've been doing or going through some of these exercises, have you noticed that the user search behavior has changed? I've picked up on, it seems like a lot of users are searching for longer terminology as well as doing multiple searches, like follow-up questions as an example. Is that something that your team has been noticing as well?
Yeah, it's actually been it's been a massive shift. So think about it this way: a Google search or a Bing search, that's a stateless conversation. You ask a question, you get results. The conversation is now over. You may ask a second question, but it's not built on the first question. The second question is a brand new question. There's no state to it. There's no conversation. With generative AI, the users and our customers are entering into long form conversations with AI. So these conversations may take the place over 2 or 3 questions, or a conversation may take place over days. So the fact that instead of asking or querying and getting a response, they're now entering into what is almost like a relationship with a machine, a short-term relationship with a machine in a conversation. That's a dramatic shift. And it also makes it super difficult to predict where these conversations are going to go. It's relatively straightforward to predict the first question, and you can likely infer the second question, but then as the conversation takes turns through the 4th, 10th, however many questions in the conversation, that becomes unpredictable. So therein lies the creativity part, I think, in the marketing and potentially the challenge. Plus we don't have any insight because the AI engines are not disclosing any of these conversations. So basically past question 1 or 2 or 3, we're kind of left to our own devices.
Right. I think that's where really understanding the audience can be a benefit, though, just as you were describing before in your last point, because the more you know, the more you can kind of follow them through that user journey and have a better understanding of those follow-up questions that they're going to be asking.
Yeah, it's almost like a role-playing situation. If I were in this person's situation and I had their concerns, what would be my conversation with this machine? And that typically is your guidepost. I mean, fortunately, in terms of insurance, insurance tends to be a little bit more of a transactional business. We've also worked with addiction recovery, and that's not necessarily as much of a transactional business. That's a discovery situation where somebody's discovering the solution to a problem, an addiction. Whereas insurance is more like, I need to learn about this insurance product and its characteristics, and then I'm looking for this product. So fortunately, I think the insurance business lends itself to a little bit more of the mathematical side of it and a little bit of the creativity, but not as much as like some businesses that are going to be a little bit more on the creative side. And then these conversations may actually last for days, whereas I don't think an insurance conversation is probably going to last for days. It's probably going to be that 1 through 5 question conversation type situations, which we do have a better handle on predicting via the existing tools that we have.
Agreed. And when we're thinking about some of those tools, obviously understanding the customer is key. But if you did want to do just some research utilizing other tools, I know there's like Answer the Public, for example, is a great tool to learn more about some of those questions that users could be asking related to topics. Are there any other tools that you all utilize regularly?
Absolutely. There's a free tool called Google Trends. Now, Google Trends will show you relative search popularity for different phrases. So, like, if you're on the fence of like, should I use this phrase or this phrase in my website to draw and search, it'll give you very specific results telling you what the most popular phrase is. The other tool we use is a paid tool called SEM Rush. And that has some AI components to it, but it's primarily dedicated to SEO and search engines. Fortunately, since there's so much overlap between traditional search and generative AI, the first and second questions will typically mirror the same questions that people will ask of a search engine. So at least we get that starting point and the data for that starting point. And then the getting to know the customer and the customer journey better is what gets us to the third, fourth, and fifth question in that conversation.
That's great. So what does that look like in application? So we know a little bit more about the customer. We know what they're searching for. What does that look like when it comes to a content strategy, or how do we then put that into action on our website?
Well, back to the EEAT acronym. If you think of everything in terms of service, I would say, if you've ever heard the 5 love languages, AI's love language is acts of service. So the more you serve your customers with fantastic content that answers their question, the better of an experience they have on your website. And the richer that you make your website, the better you're going to perform in search and AI, for sure.
Have you found along those same lines? So insurance is obviously very niche, so we can get very specific with our content, and also we have a lot of perspectives to share when it comes to like thought leadership on specific topics. Have you seen success in kind of that realm and some of those more niche industries when it comes to building out that content?
Absolutely. AI and search at this point is completely built on information that they've mined from the internet. Just like as a human learns, experiences the world, and is trained, and then gains awareness and insights and becomes smarter, that's exactly how AI works, except that instead of being trained in the real world by walking around and interacting with the real world, AI and search engines read the web, and that's their basis for information. So if you are authoritative and you have some of the best information about insurance or whatever subject matter the organization that you're marketing is marketing, then you are going to be part of that training. And if you're part of that training, you'll typically be rewarded with a brand reference mention and potentially a link within AI. Exactly the same as the search results, except instead of a list of links, the links are now as part of a conversation that's been synthesized by AI.
Yeah, I think that's a real opportunity, especially when we're thinking about our partners and insurance agencies. We are really niche, so anytime there's an opportunity to share specific thought leadership or content that's specific to our industry, that's something that can really stand out if you have that perspective to share. Kind of along those same lines, I'd love to hear your perspective on content. And now it seems like we're writing for 2 different audiences, right? We're writing for the customers, but then we're also writing for LLMs like ChatGPT and Gemini. So do you have any practical tips on how to balance that when it comes to the content that we're putting out there?
I would always err on the side of serving the customer with the best information possible. Now, with that said, there has to be some strategy put into that, because a lot of folks have gone down this kind of shotgun approach where they just write about anything that's related to their subject matter. That's not necessarily going to work that well. What you have to write about is specifically the questions that your customers are asking of AI and search engines. So instead of spreading your resources thin, writing about everything and maybe not doing the best possible job because you're so spread thin, if you write about very specific things, the parts of the business and the business lines that you want to expand and want to get more online leads for, anything that you can do to write information that's going to be helpful to the customers is going to help educate the customers and is going to be just a little bit better than your competitors that are writing similar information. That's going to win in the online marketplace.
Yeah, I think that's a great perspective to keep in mind because we hear a lot about like AI slop, for example, and it's just general content that doesn't really add any value. So I think, it goes back to those 101 practices of writing for the customer at the end of the day.
I think, yeah, I really think like if you just keep this one thing in mind, and this is your overriding goal, I want to serve my customer with the best possible information. And then layer on top of that, like what do you want to serve? What's going to build your organization and what business lines do I want to promote online? But once you've determined that and your mindset is, I want the customer to have the best possible experience on this website, and I want to write the best content that I possibly can to serve those customers, you're going to be rewarded.
Yeah, I think that's great practical advice. I want to circle back because we briefly had talked about measurement a little bit earlier. So I know it's still early days when it comes to LLMs, but is there anything that businesses can do as far as Google Analytics go or tracking goes as a starting point to at least have an initial spot as far as measurement of LLMs?
Yeah, the answer is the tools are not good yet. They're in their infancy. I mean, this whole technology in its infancy. Like, think a year ago that we were barely talking about this, and now it's everything. We're using a hybridized approach where we're using traditional search and measurement and metrics tools like Google Analytics and Looker Studio. We're integrating some of the estimation, like marketing estimation tools like SEMrush. They have some, very alpha moving to beta level products that are starting to give us some insights into how brands are mentioned and positioned within AI. And then of course, on the analytics side, if we get inbound links from AI, generative AI like ChatGPT or Google Gemini, we're going to be able to attribute that link to them. So at least we're going to be getting that level of information. I would look for these tools to start solidifying within a year or so. I don't know if, because then they're in such a hyper competitive market, I don't foresee any of the major AI players disclosing too much information to the marketplace yet, because any of that information could be used by their competitors to gain leverage over them. So unfortunately for us, that leaves us a little bit in the dark. But I think between the novel approach, the novel application of some of our existing SEO style and search tools, plus some of the insights we're just starting to get, we're at least getting enough information where it's giving us some guidance.
Right. Yeah. I know as marketers, we always want more visibility into data and metrics. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how some of those tracking tools unfold over the coming years. One thing that we have done internally to at least understand LLM traffic is set up a report within our Google Analytics that at least tells us what kind of search traffic we're getting. So I think that's also a nice, at least first step. I know it doesn't give full visibility, but I think it also puts things into perspective when we're looking at our website traffic and the different sources as a whole, because LLMs are still making up less than 5% of our overall search traffic. So it's kind of nice to have that reminder and just to put things into perspective too.
Yeah. Fortunately for insurance is going to be a more product or service type search. So you're not going to be as disrupted as much as somebody that a company that's like using like a pure information or thought leadership type strategy, where those are being disrupted currently at around 50%.
Yeah, we're lucky that's not the current case for the insurance industry, and that we at least have a little bit more time to hopefully adapt before we get to that point.
Yeah, and I think the tool, by the time that you have to really adapt, I think the tools are going to be out of their infancy stage and we'll have some more actionable information from the tools. So I think we'll have that going for us. Plus, when it comes to transactional type and products and service searches, those almost directly, the difference between what people are entering into AI and entering into a search engine are almost identical. So fortunately, we don't have nearly as much guesswork versus like a pure like thought leadership type play. Like, for example, if you're getting brand impressions because you have a thought leadership article, that's something that's becoming more difficult and becoming discounted currently. I'm hoping and thinking that probably that won't be discounted for long, because it's a situation of like, so if LLMs are trained by information on the web and LLMs are discounting the value of the information on the web, that means people are going to create less information, and that creates a cycle where the LLMs lose their training data. So it's my sense that they'll figure out some way to remunerate folks that are creating good content. And we're seeing that, I think, more with brand mentions and links than we were even 3 months ago. So I think there is hope.
Yeah, it's good to see brands getting credit for good content, and hopefully that trend will continue over time. One last kind of topic I want to talk about when we're thinking about SEO, GEO, AEO, whatever we want to call it these days. There's so many terminologies going around. But when it comes to kind of structured data and technical things that we can do on our websites to help, not only with SEO, but also with AEO, GEO, what does that look like? And is schema still relevant these days?
Schema has never been more relevant, and schema has just recently been expanded to include a ton of new AI specific schema tags, which we'll probably be talking about on our next marketing call. It's never been more important to accurately and completely implement schema on the website so that LLMs can crawl the website and understand it in unambiguous terms. And then for folks that have never heard the term schema or structured data, all this is metadata that is presented in the back end of the website that's targeted at LLMs and search engines to tell them who you are, what you do, what you sell, who you serve, where you do that, all the information about you, so that these machines don't have to interpret your website. You tell them specifically, in very specific terms, who you are and what your website is about. So super important. And there's a big opportunity for brands to be first movers in that field. And we're across the board with all of our clients, we're encouraging them to take that first mover advantage. We know that the last time that we looked, I think it was a month ago, across the insurance industry, and your competitors specifically, quantity zero of those were implementing the new AI schema tags. So we're absolutely going to be using that to our advantage for your website. And knowing, I mean, the insurance industry is incredibly competitive, one of the most competitive industries in online marketing. So that first mover advantage will evaporate, but let's use it for a year before anybody else catches up.
Yeah, it seems like low-hanging fruit because it's not really difficult to implement too, especially if you work with a website developer. So I think those early adopters will definitely see some benefits from it. And even just adding schema to our website, we've seen an increase. So yeah, I think it's definitely still relevant and something for early adopters to hopefully benefit from.
Yeah.
I want to end on this question, Tony. So, if a business wants to improve online visibility over the next year, what is the first thing or one thing that they should prioritize right now?
Get to know your customers and figure out how to serve your customers better than your competitors on the internet. The internet's love language is acts of service. Serve your customer. You have the best website, the best content on that website, the most information on that website, the easiest to navigate website, and then also implement all the technical goodies like schema and all the best practices. You're going to win.
Tony, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, and thanks to everyone listening to What's Brewing. We'll catch you next time.
Providing insurance answers together is what we do best. Thanks for tuning in to the latest episode of What's Brewing. Until next time.